Hi, Year 10. We're going to deliver feedback a little bit differently for this assessment task, a little bit similar to how we deliver feedback in HSIE in Year 11 and 12. We're going to spend a lot of time looking at your assessment task because it's important that you take information from the task and apply it to the next assessment task. Now, not everything is going to apply. You're not going to have the same question, but we look at skills and content and we look at how we can improve those skills and content levels so you can ensure that you see an improvement in your next task. In Year 11 and 12, we spent a lot of time looking at feedback of the assessment task. So there's no point in getting your mark back and shoving your assessment task in the bottom of your school bag and then not looking at it until you clean your bag out at the end of the term. It's important that you look at your task and read the feedback, but also do activities around that feedback to help you improve. So we're going to spend pretty much the whole lesson looking at feedback for this task. And at the top of the document, so you should have your laptops down at the moment, but at the top of the document, if you can see on the screen, it tells you what the effective feedback cycle is. So we start at this point here where we discover the issues, okay, the issues that you might have in your writing, that you might have in your content, or using examples. And that might be self-discovery, where you can see those issues or you already know or are aware of those issues. Or it might be assisted discovery, okay, where Miss and I will highlight those concerns in your response with you. We then look at analyze the causes and consequences of those errors. How far down on the grade scale did that take you because your writing may not be at a sophisticated level? Then we look at options and solutions. What can we do to fix it? Okay, then we commit to an action. Okay, so there's no point in acknowledging that there is an error or an area a weakness that you need to fix. You need to commit to improving that. Otherwise, you will never see an improvement in Year 10. Then you need to evaluate the performance of the improvement. So after the next task, set a goal after this task, how you're going to commit to the action, and after the next task, evaluate your performance. Did you see any improvement in the area that you focused on? Okay, so the core question was to explain why the Marriage Act 2017 was amended and discuss the effects of the changes on society in Australia. So there was two parts to this question. Explain why it was amended and discuss the effects of the amendment. Now, if you did the above level task, you obviously had a very different question, still around the Marriage Act and the amendments, but evaluate the effectiveness of the Marriage Act 2017 on society and the legal system. So, the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is, once the teacher stops this video in a moment, you're going to open up your laptop and go to your Google Drive. You are then going to open either the feedback document for the core task or the feedback document for the above level, depending on what activity you did. Then you are going to reread your response in silence. Once you have done that, you are then going to add to this table of strengths and weaknesses. So areas to develop are your weaknesses because they can be fixed. So focus on your strengths, focus on your weaknesses, and dot point. You need to reread through the response. We did not give a summative comment at the end. There are comments throughout the text, and there is a feedback sheet that has your criteria and on the other hand, it has strengths and areas to develop that we have ticked based on your response. You need to read your response and fill in this table. The teacher is going to stop the video now and give you about 10 minutes to do this. Okay, now that you've read your response, we're now going to look at skills versus content. So skills are focused around how to answer the question and construct a response. The content is focused on what is given. Now, what I found marking these responses, content was really good, but you didn't know how to construct the response, how to put it in words that sound sophisticated and have an element of academic language and subject-specific terminology. When you don't have the skills component, the content cannot be relayed as effectively. So you need to make sure that you're focusing on building upon your skills, and these skills are going to apply in every assessment task until you finish the HSC, and if you choose to go to university, in university as well. And in everyday life, being able to construct a sentence that's grammatically correct, sending an email, applying for a loan. Okay, you need to be able to communicate what you are trying to say in the most effective and sophisticated way as possible. So skills. Skills are transferable, meaning that what you develop and build upon this year will assist you in the preliminary and HSC course. If you don't build upon these skills, you are going to be one step behind when you start year 11. So it's really important that you build upon these skills now. We need to focus on developing the following skills based on your assessment task. Interpreting the question. So what is the question asking me to do? Creating a logical, cohesive, and sustained response. Logical meaning that it makes sense. When you read the response, it makes sense according to the question. Cohesive, that it all flows together, that you're using text connectives to help the cohesiveness of your response, that you use paragraphs to ensure that there's cohesiveness, and a sustained response, that you are spending even amount of time on each paragraph, that you don't have a paragraph that lasts 2 pages and then a paragraph that lasts 4 lines. That we use evidence and data to support your legal and commerce concepts. Okay, especially in HSIE subjects, you cannot provide an argument or a point or content without supporting that with evidence. Okay, and not hypothetical, so not made up scenarios. It needs to be real evidence. And being brave, creating an overall thesis in your introduction. Okay, what is the opinion that you have without saying, I believe or I feel, in your introduction, but putting that thesis in your response as clearly as possible and drawing back to that thesis throughout your response. I'm going to ask you to now open up your laptops again, and I want you to, next to this little diagram here, you're going to write a number as to where you feel confident. Sorry, not next to the diagram, you can do it up here. Based on your confidence level, how confident are you in interpreting the question? Okay, so it might be a level 7, and you just put a 7 next to that dot point. Actually, ignore what I said. I've created the table. You can do that in the table. Okay, so put the confidence level in the table. So it might be a level 7. Okay, it might be a level, the next one might be a level 8. You're going to spend about 2 minutes now doing that. The teacher's going to pause the video and open up your laptop, and you can fill in that table now. Okay, the teacher should have asked you now to put your laptop down. If you haven't, can you please do that? Now we're going to focus on how do you plan to improve these skills before the next assessment task. So this is committing to the action. Choose one area and come up with a strategy. So your area might be creating a logical and cohesive and sustained response with a clear structure and improve your spelling. Okay, so it might be that your strategy is that you create a glossary of terms where you can practice your spelling of those terms. It might be that you practice extended response paragraphs before the next assessment task. So I want you to choose an area and now plan how you are going to improve in that area. So I'm going to ask you to open your laptops again, and you can delete these lines and answer that question. Okay, can you now make sure that your laptops are down? And we are now going to look at content. Okay, so looking at the actual question and the content around the Marriage Act. So there's a little content checklist that you're going to complete in a moment. Do I know my content is 100% correct? Is the content I'm providing relevant? Have I provided enough depth? So you need to answer or tick these 3 boxes if you feel that you can answer those questions confidently. Once you have done that, you now need to choose a particular area to work on. So do you think you have an area to work on? So it might be that all the content that you have included is not relevant to the question. Why do you think you need to work on that area? Or why don't you think you need to work on that area? Or why do you think you don't have an area to improve? Now, everybody has an area to improve on. So there should be no one saying, no, I don't have an area to improve on. Everyone has an area to improve on in content. So, laptop's up again, and can you please answer that question? Okay, now can we put our laptops down? Now this applies, we're going to go through the criteria, and we're going to do the first criteria both above level and core together. Now, it wasn't explicit in core that you explain the amendments, but in order to show how effective they are, you need to have some level of explanation within your response. So it wasn't explicit, but it was expected, otherwise you couldn't show the effectiveness. So for the core, comprehensive explanation of both cause and effect of the 2017 amendments to the Marriage Act, supported by relevant examples and data. Okay, that was a really important part. The other important part was that you had to have an explanation, both cause and effect, of the amendments. Comprehensive meaning that you need to have more than one reason. So at least 2 reasons as to why it changed. Why did the Marriage Act change in 2017? So we were looking for this both in core and above level. So the feedback from that. Many students failed to provide more than one reason as to why the Marriage Act was amended. And many students did not support the reason they provided with clear and real evidence. So you might have given a hypothetical scenario, but it wasn't real evidence. Okay, it wasn't data or a quote from an article. It was a hypothetical example. So I've provided a sample or part of a sample of one student's response where they've shown 2 reasons and they are quite detailed in those reasons. So I'm going to read it and you're going to follow on the whiteboard with me. The Australian government's role is to work at the best interests of society, which in some cases leads to laws being changed or amended. Reasons for the amendment of the Marriage Act 1961 include the ongoing push for legal recognition of same-sex marriage, the violation of human rights felt by the LGBT community, and the fact that Australia was already very behind in the issue. So you can see this student has done like a little introduction into the reasons that he or she are going to further discuss, explain. Now, it's not perfect. It's not a perfect response. And personally, I would have started with one reason and explain it. Second reason, explain it. Which is why I said get straight to the reasons why it changed. The LGBT community have constantly sparked debate within Australian politics. For years, there has been a desire from Australian citizens, in particular those involved in same-sex relationships, for the government to finally recognise same-sex couples. This is evident where between 1996 and 2011, the number of same-sex couples has almost tripled, resulting in approximately 46,800 same-sex couples in Australia, according to the 2016 census. Due to this statistic proving increased prominence in same-sex relationships and the number only growing, most people felt it more necessary for the Australian government to recognise the severity of this issue. The student has provided a very clear reason, supported it with evidence, real evidence, and then linked back to it being important that they made the change. Furthermore, text connective, showing the next reason. Another reason for the amendment of the Marriage Act in 1961 is the violation of human rights felt by the LGBT community. Now, I'm not going to go into the second reason, but you can see that this student's response is very extensive in explaining why it changed. Now, if you attempted the above level, you aren't going to have an explanation section like this in your response. But to show how effective it has been on society, you had to show why it changed. So I want you to now read this section of your response. If you did the core, I want you to write in what your strength was in this section. So delete the lines and type in what your strength was. Go to where you wrote the explanation of why the law changed, reread it, and choose your strengths. Then you need to plan on how you improve with weaknesses in this section. Maybe you didn't use real evidence or data to support it. Maybe you only had one reason. Okay, how are you going to improve it? It might be read the question carefully. It might be to further prepare for the response in future, to look at evidence and data. If you did the above level task, I still want you to answer these questions, but I want you to focus on, can you see the reasons why it changed in your response? If you can do that, please put a star next to those reasons. And how could you improve your response, or where could you include the reasons why it changed in your current response? I'm going to ask the teacher to allow you to open your laptops now and complete those 2 questions. Okay, laptops down again. The next criteria was an extensive discussion given on the effects of the changes. Now you had to show both positive and negative effects, and you had to provide data to support the position, to support what you are saying. Most students provided one positive and or negative effect of the change, but did not elaborate into how or why it was positive or negative. So you need to further explain your point. A discussion requires an explanation of your point. So if you said it met society's needs of the LGBT community or same-sex couples, why is that a positive thing? Explain why it's a positive thing. So you needed depth and detail in this part of the response. There were many instances where students used very generic examples. So, for example, a positive impact is that same-sex couples feel happier and included. Yes, that's true, but do you have proof? You need to support your response with proof and evidence. Think of a court case. You can't make a point in a court case without having evidence to support that point. It's the same thing in a response in HSIE. If you make a point, you need to have real proof to support it. Some students incorporated too many feelings and emotions rather than legal benefits or limitations. This is a legal task, law and society, so you need to focus on what the legal benefits and limitations are. So I provided for the core students a sample. Continuing on, the Amendment of the Marriage Act 1961 had both positive and negative impacts on society. An advantage of the amendment is its success in granting the ongoing wants of society. However, a disadvantage is that not all of Australians voted, hence there is controversy as to whether the vote is a true reflection of society as a whole. Again, this student has done a little introduction. My advice is to get straight to the point. What is the positive? And then later on, what is the negative? As stated previously, ongoing pressure for legal recognition of same-sex couples is something that was evident in society for many years. For example, the plebiscite that was sent out to all Australian households in the amendment. A vote cannot be a reflection of society as a whole if not everyone participates, thus meaning that these figures are accountable for only those who choose to vote rather than Australia as a whole. Accordingly, whilst the same-sex vote was effective in managing to cater to a wider part of society, it was yet ineffective due to not all of society having their say. Now you can see that this student has shown a positive and negative effect. It is not perfect. It does not have evidence to support the argument. Okay, so a stronger response would have here actual statistics on how many people didn't vote, and therefore it's ineffective. Okay, it's only showing 60% of society's opinion on the issue. So how is it a true reflection of what people want? Now I want you to read the rest of your response, the positive and negatives, the discussion part. Once you have done that, you need to answer these questions. Did you provide at least one positive effect of the change? If your answer is yes, highlight it. If your answer is no, highlight no. Go through each of these points while reading your response and answer the questions. If you attempted the above level task, this part was very different. It required an extensive evaluation of the effectiveness of changes on various segments of society. Now, this response is a HSC style question. So the level that we are expecting is not at a HSC level. So many of you did quite well considering that you are in year 10 and attempting this question. So students, some feedback for the above level students. Students need to focus on criteria that is used to measure effectiveness. Students should ensure that their judgment is well supported throughout the paragraph. You had to link back to your criteria all the time, and you had to link back to your judgment throughout the paragraph, not just using the criteria in your point sentence. For example, if resource efficiency is the criteria you are showing the effect on, then you must refer back to that argument regularly and that criteria regularly. It must also support your judgment of overall effectiveness of the amendment. Students must also show reasons why the amendment was ineffective and also base this on criteria. Now you have to remember the law is never black and white. There is always grey areas. So if you focus on just effectiveness, it's not the case because in reality there are levels of ineffectiveness. So I have included a sample for the above level. I'm not going to read this to you. You can read it. But this student has shown both effectiveness and ineffectiveness and contradicted their argument but held a stronger argument in effectiveness and then noted the elements of ineffectiveness. So I want you to read that if you did above level. If you did core, can everyone open up their laptops now, read your section in the task and answer the questions. The teacher will give you enough time to do that. And above level, you also have questions to answer based on your task. So can everyone please do that now? Okay, the next criteria was to, back to core, apply relevant examples and demonstrate extensive research skills with at least 2 appropriate and reliable sources accurately recorded in a bibliography. So many students used examples but did not apply them to the point that they were making. This is a skill that takes a long time to build. Okay, students must back up their argument with supportive evidence. It should be real evidence and it should be in text reference. So your evidence needs to support the point that you're saying, otherwise it's irrelevant. Okay, you need to apply it to the point, okay, which can be quite difficult to do and it's a skill that takes a long time. Probably the weakest part of this task was in-text referencing. Okay, there wasn't many students at all who in-text referenced. It's important that you in-text reference, otherwise it can be taken as plagiarism in the HSC. So you must have that in-text referencing. I've provided an example of an application of an example or evidence in a response. So the plebiscite that was sent out to all Australian households proved the desire for the amendment to be made when 61.6% of voters voted yes in favour of same-sex marriage. Therefore, this amendment is said to be at benefit to society due to it being a true reflection of their wants, and so the government being effective in granting those wishes. Now, great application of evidence. Okay, they're saying that there is a desire to make the change. They've proved that desire with evidence, but there is no in-text reference as to where that source came from. Looking at the bibliography, it's really important that you have your bibliography in alphabetical order, year 10. Okay, that's a really important point. Now, this student had a number of different sources, which was fantastic, but I've only chosen 2 to put in just to show you the correct referencing. Now, your activities for this section. You're going to choose one paragraph to read where you know you used examples. I want you to focus on your application of the evidence. Upon reading your application, reading your own paragraph, how would you rate your application of evidence? Now, I know this might be a little bit difficult to do, seeing as you're doing it on the laptop. So if you want to number these from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and next to the box you can put the number of where you would rate your application of evidence. Once you have done that Year 10, you are going to rewrite this paragraph and apply the evidence, okay, or apply the section where you used evidence. And I want you to make sure that you in-text reference this part as well. Once you have done that, you are going to choose one source from your bibliography, and using the link below, I'm going to put a link in now, rewrite the reference as it should appear in the bibliography. Or you can use your college diary and use the referencing page in your college diary to help you do that. So you're going to choose one source and you're going to reference it. Now, if you didn't have a bibliography, you are going to need to find a source to reference correctly that you used in your response. My advice is to never ever hand in a response without a bibliography, especially as you move into Year 11 and 12, it will be seen as plagiarism. Now, if you did the above level, you had to integrate relevant examples, and this is quite difficult to do. Students must integrate relevant examples that support the level of effectiveness based on the criteria. It means that it should be in-text referenced, and you shouldn't be using for example, okay, at this level, at above level. In the HSC, we want to see integrated examples. So this is moving beyond that structure of for example and making your example flow within the text. This is a skill that takes time to build upon. Now, there was no student that was able to do this consistently and effectively, but I provided an example for you using the student's response above that you had just recently read. So the amendment has been somewhat ineffective in ensuring resource efficiency in relation to funds, where the postal survey cost approximately $122 million of taxpayers' money. And I've in-text referenced The Guardian 2017. Funds that could have been used to improve other elements of the Australian society, such as medical research. Now you can see I have integrated the example into my paragraph, into my response. I haven't put for example or to illustrate. This is quite difficult to do. Okay, so if you didn't achieve this, some students did achieve above level for this, but it wasn't at the level that you'd expect in Year 11 and 12, so keep that in mind. And this is a clearer example of that. And I want you to do the same thing, but I have to change this to integrate the evidence. So you are going to read the paragraph, focus on if you're above level, integration of the evidence, rate your integration, and rewrite the paragraph to integrate the evidence, and same thing with the bibliography. Choose one that you can rewrite correctly. With above level bibliography, you need to make sure that you're using sources that give you relevant information rather than just any background research. So you're only using the sources in above level that you use to help you write your response. Okay, can you open up your laptops and can you complete both core and above level on application of examples or integration of examples based on whatever response you did? Okay, moving on. The last part of the criteria was to present a sustained, logical and cohesive response with sophisticated use of clear and relevant legal terminology and concepts. This is the part that let many of you down in trying to articulate your content. So you need to ensure that what you are writing makes sense. This means that you'll have to read over the response to yourself, not out loud, in your head, to ensure that when you read it back to yourself, it makes sense. There were many times where students' responses did not make sense at all. You need to use capital letters and punctuation when necessary. There were too many students starting sentences with lowercase letters, not writing the Marriage Act in capital letters, not referring to legal terminology correctly, not using punctuation, having sentences that went on for half a page. This really disrupts the read of your response, and you cannot articulate yourself properly. It also, for the marker in the HSE, does not create a good impression. Okay, what impression marking means is that the first time that the HSE marker reads the response, looks at the response, they are going to make an impression of your response based on things like punctuation and capital letters. Yes, you are not marked on it, but it does affect the logical and cohesive component of your response. It creates a bad impression. You do not want to create that bad impression to your marker. So make sure that you are using capital letters and punctuation correctly. You need to also make reference to legal terminology accurately and correctly. So, we only refer to same-sex couples as same-sex couples. Okay, we don't use the term gay or homosexual. It is just referring to same-sex couples. They are the only ones that are impacted in the Marriage Act, the change to the Marriage Act. So you need to make sure that you're referring to legal terminology and concepts accurately and correctly. It's the Marriage Act 2017 or the Marriage Act Amendment 2017. Okay, if you're referring to the Marriage Act 1961, that's the original act. Okay, we're looking at the changed act. I want you now to go over your response again and answer these questions in the same way as you did previously. Did you write enough? Okay, when I say enough, I'm looking for at least 4 to 5 pages, okay, to answer this response. If you didn't write 4 to 5 pages, highlight no and move on to the next question. So can you take some time now answering these questions? Okay, now that you have finished your feedback sheet, the teacher is going to go into a drive and have a look at that at a later date. I want to stress to you the importance of using this document and using this video again before your next assessment task. So closer to the next assessment task, we're going to go back and look at assessment task 1. And you're going to look back at your feedback sheet and what did you focus on? What did you commit to? What strategy have you put in place to ensure that you're meeting the next goal and the next target to improve in commerce? It's really important that we focus on improvement year 10. Otherwise, if you always do what you've always done, you're always going to get the same mark. And we need to make those changes in order to grow in HSIE.